Tantor Audio, a division of Recorded Books, presents Reluctant Housemates by Linda Barrett, narrated by Coleen Marlo. Chapter 1. Total devastation. No roof, barely a wall. Not a single classroom remained intact. Rachel Goodman stared at what used to be the high school, trying to visualize the neat brick building that had stood on the spot just yesterday, before the tornado had struck. "It's unbelievable," she murmured to the police officer assigned to the site.
"Maybe to an Easterner," the cop replied, "but Round Rock, Kansas isn't Tornado Alley. Twisters happen all the time during the season."
Rachel's hands fisted at her side as a shiver raced through her. She managed, however, to cling to one happy thought. Thank goodness it's summer, and the school was empty. The man nodded.
"But the building's done for, Miss Goodman. Not much left."
The cop scanned the area once more, his expression bleak.
"Can't be used."
Rachel followed his gaze. The man was right. Her students would have to attend somewhere else when classes resumed after the summer break 3 weeks from now. She waved to the officer and walked to her parked Ford Explorer. Creative planning would be needed to ensure the students' education. As one of the high school's 3 assistant principals, she'd be very much involved. In fact, she glanced at her watch and realized she had barely enough time to try reaching her parents again before her 3 o'clock meeting with her principal and the other assistants. Sitting in the front seat of her vehicle, she punched the auto dial on her cell phone. The landlines in town were down, and every time she'd called Pilgrim Cove, Massachusetts on her mobile, she'd been unable to get through. Her folks were probably frantic by now. Or maybe not. If they'd listened to the news, they'd know that no lives had been lost. Maybe she was worrying for nothing. Her dad would probably think that not contacting them was typical of Rachel. He'd expected little of her while she was growing up, and that's exactly what she'd given him. Very little. C's and D's were good enough. How could she possibly compete with Alex? 10 years older than she, her brother had been the perfect one. A straight-A student, president of the student council, and universally popular with adults. Alex also had loads of friends and was certainly the pride of her father's heart. Rachel had recognized a no-win situation, and communication between father and daughter had never been strong. After Rachel had entered college on a swimming scholarship, plus some good SAT scores, she'd struck out on her own, returning home only for brief visits. But tornadoes required some consideration on her part. She listened to the normal ring at the other end of her cell and felt relieved. Finally, the promise of connection.
"Hello? Hello?"
Her dad's voice, tense. "It's Rachel. It's the first—"
"Rachel, Rachel, hold on, don't go away."
Then she heard him call,
"Pearl, pick up the extension. Rachel's on the phone. She must be fine. She's talking."
Guilt threatened to overwhelm Rachel. Of course her parents would be worried about her. She took a breath when he came back on. "I'm fine, Dad. The phone lines were down here, and I have a new cell phone. Just got it a couple of days ago, so you don't have the number. I'm sorry. I've been trying every half hour. I'm fine, Mom. Truly. Yes, totally in one piece." There were no casualties, except for the high school, which was completely destroyed. There was remarkably little damage to the town.
"Thank God."
Her dad's utterance was heartfelt. She had more news to convey. "Listen, folks, about my visit home next week, I may not be able to leave town. I have no idea what my principal has in mind or what the school board will decide for the next term. Whatever it is, I'm sure I'll have to stick around here." Her parents' disappointment was audible. Rachel chatted for a little while and promised to let them know the outcome of today's meeting. Maybe she'd still be able to fly home for a quick visit. They could hardly know that she referred to her yearly treks east, not as a vacation, but as her pilgrimage to Pilgrim Cove. Her mixed feelings about going home plagued her each time she went. Her teenage years had been difficult. In fact, her memories of high school gave her hives. She'd been too tall, too gawky. Her breasts had forgotten to develop, and the heavy braces on her teeth hadn't helped. All she wanted was to fit in. Before she found her salvation in swimming, she'd tried joining a club, but felt out of place. She tried basketball because of her height, but she was clumsy, dropping the ball, falling. Her teammates had groaned, and the opposing side had laughed. She hadn't cared about schoolwork and grades at all. She'd only wanted friends. Some teachers had felt sorry for her. Some had tried to reassure her father, the school librarian. There had been one old biddy. She automatically squeezed her eyes shut, intentionally dismissing the memory. Darn it! She wasn't a sensitive 15-year-old anymore. She was beyond that hurt now. Her school memories weren't the only bad ones. She'd disappointed her folks throughout her childhood, and again as an adult, by choosing to live far away. And her brothers still resented her. She sighed and shook her head. Family relations were often complicated. Well, she and Alex would never be close, but she was crazy about his kids, and she'd miss seeing her niece and nephew this summer if she didn't take her vacation. Turning her key in the ignition, Rachel scanned her surroundings. She'd been very happy in this landlocked part of the country since arriving as a college freshman. She'd been happy at her university, happy being on her own with no family history dogging her. She'd been so content with her life that after college graduation, she'd decided to stay in the Midwest. The last 2 years as assistant principal in Round Rock had kept her busy. Most of the time she had no regrets. But lately, sometimes, when the nights were long and she had no one to share them with, she was lonely. At 31, she'd had a couple of relationships that had gone nowhere. Always her decision, but the results were the same. She spent her nights alone. And occasionally, when her Sundays stretched along with no family to visit, to have dinner with, to talk with, she wished Pilgrim Cove weren't so far away. In the next moment, however, her stomach would tighten, and she'd laugh at herself. She'd been on her own for 13 years now, and an unhappy truth hit her with recurring regularity. She was alone. Her stomach often tightened at this thought, too, but somehow she couldn't manage to laugh the idea away. She glanced at her watch as she headed back to town for her meeting. In the end, Pilgrim Cove, Massachusetts was her past. Round Rock, Kansas was her future. She had no intention of leaving the Midwest. Notebook and pen in hand, Rachel sat on the end of the sofa in John Thompson's living room. For a man who was usually organized and direct, he seemed to be fumbling for words. Of course, the shock of the destroyed school could account for his loss of equilibrium. But Rachel didn't think that was the explanation. The principal was well seasoned in his job. Rachel glanced at the other 2 assistant principals in the room. Both older than she, both married with families, and both looking as concerned as Rachel felt. "You're wearing a hole in your carpet, Mr. Thompson," said Rachel with a smile. "No one was hurt, and that's the most important thing." The principal paused in his step and sat down in a club chair opposite Rachel and her 2 colleagues.
"You're absolutely right, and I hope you keep that in mind when I tell you what the school district has decided. In fact, why I called this meeting as soon as I learned their plans."
"Go on," said one of the assistants. The man took a deep breath.
"In a nutshell, our students will be divided and bused to 2 other high schools. A few portable classrooms will be erected at each facility to prevent overcrowding. Our teachers will be reassigned to these schools to work with the faculties there."
He stopped talking for a moment. Suddenly, Rachel's stomach sank to her toes. She knew where this conversation was going. "And we administrators are out of jobs?" she asked softly. No one moved. The silence in the room made her ears throb, wiping out the bird song coming from the trees outside the window.
"I'm afraid so,"
replied Thompson with a heavy sigh.
"At least for now. For this year. Or whenever a new school is built. I've got a family to support."
"Is there unemployment insurance? John, are there any alternatives?" The exclamations of dismay from her colleagues washed over Rachel while she faced her own situation. Completely self-supporting since college graduation, she'd saved enough money to tide her over for a little while, but she needed a job.
"I've done some preliminary research, and there might be good news for some of you,"
said Thompson,
"if you want to return to the classroom on a teacher's salary."
"We need to work," said the woman next to Rachel, "and until our school is rebuilt, of course I'll go back to the classroom."
"Then you're in luck. There's an opening for a high school math teacher,"
said the principal. looking a bit more relaxed.
I can make another phone call and arrange a meeting. You should be all set.
But there wouldn't be an opening for a physical health education teacher or coach. Rachel knew it just as surely as she knew the sun would rise the next morning. Math and science teachers were always in demand. No community had enough specialists in those subjects.
I'm a licensed guidance counselor, said the third assistant principal. Any openings in schools within 50 miles? Elementary, middle, or high school. I don't care which.
The man's voice was strained, his hands clenched on his knees as he stared at the principal.
Thompson nodded. I've been inquiring for all of you. There's a counselor going on maternity leave in the middle school right here in town. A last-minute change. Oh, thank God, said the man, shaking his head. My own wife's pregnant with our second, and to be unemployed.
He closed his eyes and leaned against the back of the couch. Any rabbits in your hat for me? Asked Rachel quietly, hoping that her instincts were wrong. John Thompson just stared at her, sorrow in his eyes, crushing even the faintest of hopes.
You'll have the strongest letter of recommendation I can write, he said. In your 2 years with us, you've been a great asset, and I want you back next year if you're available.
Count on it, said Rachel, suddenly finding it difficult to speak. She swallowed a few times, trying to absorb the implications. I've enjoyed working with all of you. She looked at her colleagues. You watch out for our kids? Check up on them? They'll have so many adjustments. They reassured her. She turned toward her boss. I'll do whatever I can to help. But right now,
you need some time to catch your breath. Go home, update your resume. I'll be in touch.
Rachel stood. Thanks, John. Excuse me, everyone. She left the room. When she reached her Explorer, she collapsed against it and focused on breathing. Inhale, exhale. 2 tornadoes within 2 days, and no warning for either. What lousy timing. She loved her job, loved working with high school kids. And now, just when she'd settled in and started making her mark in Round Rock, she'd have to do a job search and relocate. She opened the car door and got in, her mind still whirling. Of course it wouldn't be the first time she'd moved, but there was one big difference now. In the past, she'd been the one initiating the change. She'd wanted a school management position after earning her master's in educational administration. She'd chosen to build her career out of the classroom, and she'd loved her work at Round Rock. If the high school was rebuilt by next year, and if John Thompson called her back, great. But there were too many ifs. She pulled out of her spot and headed toward her apartment. Looking backwards never helped, only caused pain. Now it was time to go forward, to find a new position. Time to call Pilgrim Cove, explain the situation to her folks, and cancel her flight home. Finding a new job was priority now.
Don't give up that ticket, Rachel!
Her dad's voice boomed in her ear. Rachel jerked the receiver away from her head. What was that all about? Lou Goodman rarely boomed. Her mild-mannered father, the retired librarian of Pilgrim Cove High School, took life in stride. She couldn't remember him ever raising his voice, not even to her when she screwed up. Between her lousy grades, arguing with teachers, picking fights with her brother, and being angry at the world in general, she'd given him plenty of cause. But her dad had never said much, just always looked sad, or maybe disappointed. She paced the floor of her large kitchen and cautiously placed the receiver to her ear again. Dad, I can visit during Christmas or something, but now I have to find another job.
And pack your interview clothes and take that flight.
What had he said? Interview clothes? What's going on?
Plenty's going on, my dear. The timing's perfect, and you'll be perfect in the position.
She sat down, hard. What position?
Isn't it quite remarkable how some things seem to work out? Yes, indeed. Truth is surely stranger than fiction.
Dad, what are you talking about? What things are working out? Either her father was losing it or had had an extra glass of wine. Overindulging was not a normal Lou Goodman trait.
I was going to tell you about it when you came home, but then again, it's not really good news. But since it's about our alma mater...
Her dad's voice trailed off for a moment, and in her kitchen, Rachel chuckled. He wasn't losing it. He was merely talking about Pilgrim Cove Regional High School, a subject which evoked emotion in him. He loved his career there. The school had lost an outstanding educator when he retired. He loved helping students with research and introducing them to wonderful writers. He fought for up-to-date technology so the students would have up-to-date skills. Lou Goodman considered Pilgrim Cove High his alma mater as well as hers and her brother's. "Want to start over, Dad?" she asked. Now it was her father who chuckled into the phone.
"I'll give it a whirl," he said. "Remember the standardized tests you used to take when you were in school?"
"Sure, we took them every spring." Oddly enough, she'd always done well on them. She handled standardized testing a lot better than regular schoolwork.
"The student scores came in 2 weeks ago," her father continued, "and they were not good. In fact, it pains me to say that our student scores have been decreasing over the last 3 years. Extremely disappointing."
"Oh dear, I didn't know. I'm very sorry to hear that."
"Of course you are," said Lou, his voice more cheerful. "And that's why you're going to interview for the new position the board approved last week. They acted fast. Only took 3 years.
"Dad, is that sarcasm I detect from the man who keeps his cool?"
"Cool my patootie in the face of this performance? But here's the important part."
He paused, and despite himself, Rachel focused on what was coming next.
"We now have an opening for an assistant principal of academic studies," said Lou. "Right up your alley. The application's online. Fill it out and attach your resume. Bring a hard copy with you when you come home."
Her dad sounded so excited, but images of her unhappy high school years flashed through Rachel's mind. Yes, she needed a job, but Pilgrim Cove High? The place she'd left with barely a backward glance? The place where her family lived? Short stays worked well for her. Despite her occasional longing, she'd be safer maintaining that pattern. "Can people really go home again, Dad?" she asked softly. Silence on the other end. A ringing silence filled with hurt. She could feel it vibrate through the wires and wanted to retract her words.
"Try it," said Lou. "You might be surprised."
Had her dad forgotten the distress of her teenage years? Could he not see how much happier she'd been in recent times? "Tell you what," began Rachel. "I'll stick with my vacation plans and come home. And I'll think about the job, but I'm not making any promises. Definitely not."
"That's good enough for me," replied her dad. "We want to see our beautiful daughter."
Beautiful? That was a joke. Then I must have a sister somewhere. This daughter of yours is built for distance swimming, tall and skinny with bony elbows and the delicate fragrance of l'eau de chlorine surrounding her half the time.
Rachel, you're just slim, not skinny. Have you looked in the mirror lately?"
Rachel laughed into the phone. "Every day, and the mirror doesn't lie. But I'm not going to argue with you. Let's just agree that with the right clothes and cosmetics, I can make myself presentable." The fact that she was ordinary looking didn't bother her as much as it used to. Her career was what mattered. Her administrative and communication skills, and her ability to relate to students. These talents were the ones that counted, and she'd worked hard to develop them. After saying goodbye to her dad, she walked to the computer in her den, pulled up her resume, and started revising. When she was satisfied with the result, she printed the document and studied it. "What the hell?" she finally murmured. "Might as well take a look and see what he was talking about." She accessed the job posting for Pilgrim Cove Regional High School and stared at the application form. What a joke it would be. Pure O. Henry. She could imagine the lead story in the Pilgrim Cove Gazette. Swimming jock and underachiever Rachel Goodman returns to Pilgrim Cove High charged with improving the academic performance of the entire student body. Laughable, painful, pitiful. She didn't need it. What she did need was a swim, and the community center was open, keeping to its normal schedule. A great decision, Rachel thought. Routine countered catastrophe. She glanced at her watch as she grabbed a bathing suit and towel. She'd be at the pool earlier than usual. She wondered whether or not any of the girls would show up for the training session. While no one had been hurt by the tornado, everyone had probably been scared. Her young team, however, had to prepare for a local meet this weekend. Rachel locked the door behind her and headed to the community center. Time to get back into the water. In his comfortable kitchen in Pilgrim Cove, Lou Goodman turned to his wife.
"I think you're wrong, Pearl. I really think I hooked her. The job is perfect.
But Pearl shook her head. She'll come for a week, and then she'll be gone.
But
when was the last time Rachel allowed herself to get hooked? Interrupted Pearl. Never. She swims away like a smart fish. And not only from us. Every time a decent boy, I should say man, gets serious, she runs in the other direction. So don't get your hopes up. She's coming home because she didn't want to disappoint you. That's all. Lou felt his smile slip as he walked to the woman with whom he'd spent 42 years of his life. He loved her and knew her well enough to know that she was usually right about these things. He reached for her hands as she stood at the counter preparing a simple lunch.
Pearl,
he whispered,
where did we go wrong when we tried to do everything right? How did this happen?
His head drooped.
My fault. My fault.
When she looked up at him, her eyes were shiny. Her mouth trembled. She didn't speak, just leaned closer and wrapped her arms around him. He embraced her as he'd done for a lifetime, loving how she nestled into his shoulder, how she felt against him. He'd hold her for many more years, God willing, as many as they were given on this earth. But he was 71 years old now, and still had unfinished business. Rachel walked the length of the pool, assessing the performances of each member of her team. To her delight, all 12 girls had shown up that evening, each one eager to swim. Seemed they needed to be in the water as much as she did. She wouldn't mention the probability of them getting a new coach. Not yet, anyway. Not until she knew for sure where she was going next. "Looking good, ladies," she called to them. "And time's up." "Already? No way." Rachel grinned. Her kids loved the sport. "Think we really have a chance to place at the meet?" asked one of the girls as she got out of the pool. Time for a pep talk. The girls were only 9 and 10 years old, still learning, still needing confidence. "Everyone listen up," said Rachel. The girls gathered around her, towels slung over their shoulders. "You have each improved tremendously this year because you worked very hard. And I promise you that your chances of placing in the events are as good as anyone else's." She eyeballed every girl. "Maybe better." She paused. "Believe me?" Slowly, they nodded, one at a time. "You're swimming because you love the sport. You want others to love and respect the sport. And no matter what happens at the meet, you're still going to love to swim." She paused a moment. "And who knows, you might save a life one day because you swim well. That's something more important than a meet, isn't it?" They nodded again, and Rachel watched their expressions change as they processed her words. She leaned forward as if to share a secret. "In my book, you are winners right now. Every one of you." Chapter 2. Rachel grabbed her suitcase from the carousel in Boston's Logan Airport and made her way to the water shuttle dock. As far as she was concerned, the best part of the trip was about to start. A 7-minute boat ride from the airport to Rose Wharf in Boston Harbor, followed by a half-hour ferry ride to Pilgrim Cove. How many people had the luxury of trading in bumper-to-bumper road traffic for a ferry ride as their daily commute between home and work? Not that she was going home. Her home would be wherever she'd decided to live. Today she was going back to her parents' house on Atlantic Avenue, less than 2 blocks from the beach. Whatever reservations she carried with her from her childhood, living by the ocean was not one of them. In fact, it was the best part of growing up in Pilgrim Cove. She bought a round-trip ticket for the shuttle, stepped on and quickly arrived at the large harbor in the heart of downtown Boston, where she bought another round-trip ticket for the Pilgrim Cove ferry. She leaned against the rail of the boat, studying the afternoon scene before her. Busy Boston Harbor, a luxurious hotel with a grand archway and its own dock nearby, elegant restaurants and cafes, soft rose-brick buildings with a variety of office towers all stretching upward to create an impressive skyline. And in the opposite direction, sailboats glided on the water, the sun reflecting off their pristine cloth. Motorboats, too, with people who enjoyed going against the wind. People who were probably on vacation and had jobs to return to when playtime was over. Unlike Rachel. She eyed her suitcase, which contained a navy blue summer weight suit, accented with a white collar and cuffs, a pair of low-heeled navy pumps and matching pantyhose. In the end, the reality of unemployment had prompted her to email her resume to the school board. To her surprise, she'd wound up with an appointment to meet the people on the hiring committee. The fast turnaround could only mean they were in a hurry to fill the position by the time school started. She'd come prepared, and she'd do her best. But she wasn't hungry for the job, not deep inside. For the first time in her life, she was moving with caution, staying at the shallow end of the pool. And it felt weird. Better to think of this interview as practice for other opportunities she'd be seeking.
"Rachel? Sure, it's Rachel Goodman."
Rachel twirled from the railing as the familiar voice jerked her out of her musings. An energetic couple approached. The man had bristly gray hair, and his blue eyes creased in the corners as he gave her a hearty hug. Kate Lyons spoke first. "You've just arrived, haven't you?" Rachel nodded with a grin as the couple eyed her suitcase. "I see you're both as sharp as ever?"
"And aim to stay that way," replied Mike. "In fact, I'm doing a little consulting work with the aquarium. That's where we were today."
He turned and looked back out over the bay as the ferry left the dock behind.
"We've got to take better care of these waters."
Mike Lyons was a retired environmental engineer with a strong interest in the seacoast habitat. "You and my dad," said Rachel. "Neither of you will ever be fully retired. I think he volunteers as many hours in the town library as he put in when he worked at the high school."
"We love what we do, and that makes all the difference."
"I know what you mean," said Rachel, nodding in agreement. "I really understand." "I can see that," said Kate. "Your smile gives you away. So, if they offer you the job, will you take it?" "Whoa! I'd forgotten how fast news flies around town," said Rachel. But Mike was shaking his head.
"Not the whole town, my dear. Just the breakfast boys."
"The breakfast boys?" Rachel repeated slowly, trying to remember. "You've been away too long, Rachel, or you'd never forget our boys," said Kate, eyes twinkling. "And their daily breakfasts at the diner on the dunes." "Breakfast at— You mean the ROMEOs," said Rachel. "Of course I know those boys. My dad's a charter member of the Retired Old Men Eating Out. And so are you, Mike." The man pretended to pout. She and Kate looked at each other and tried to swallow their laughter. Unnecessarily. Kate patted her husband's shoulder. "You'll always be my young stud, honey, never an old man." "She's right," said Rachel. "How can you be old when you're running around every day? Seems to me that the ROMEOs are misnamed. None of them acts retired."
"That's a fact," said Mike. "Sam Parker still works with Matt at the store, and Joe Cavelli puts in time at the garage. Ralph Bigelow does electric work for folks when they need him."
"And we can't forget the one who's putting in more hours than a day holds," said Kate, tightening her lips. "That Bartholomew Quinn, if his Rosemary were still alive, she'd flay him but good."
No, she wouldn't," said Mike. "She had almost as much energy as Bart."
Rachel listened absent-mindedly as the Lyonses brought the town alive with their descriptions and up-to-date recitation of the latest goings-on. There was only a tiny possibility that she'd remain here, so remembering any of this talk wasn't necessary. Mike's voice penetrated when he mentioned her dad.
"I had breakfast with Lou this morning. Your visit's got him walking on air. Can't remember the last time I saw him so excited."
Rachel winced.
"See what I mean?"
said Mike, pointing at the Pilgrim Cove harbor. On the big dock was Rachel's dad waving at them with the gusto of a kid. Her mom stood right next to him, hands shading her eyes as she searched the crowd on the ferry. Then a big grin crossed her face, and she waved too. Rachel's week at home had begun. The evening had gone well. First, a leisurely dinner for three in her mom's comfortable kitchen, where Rachel consumed every morsel of the braised lamb roast Pearl had put on her plate. No one could outdo her mom in the kitchen. Then she'd unpacked and had run an iron over her navy blue interview suit. And now Rachel was walking along the beach, wearing a bathing suit under a pair of shorts, a towel slung around her neck.
"I don't think the lifeguards are still on duty," her dad had said as she left the house. "Maybe you should postpone your swim."
"No way! It's a hot August night. I'll find someone to keep an eye out when I swim." She gave him a quick kiss. "I can take care of myself. Don't worry."
"Right. You're all grown up now."
His smile was brief. Dusk had fallen a while ago, and the beach was not very crowded. It had been a long time, however, since she'd strolled along the shore, and she was enjoying.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?